Hi everybody, my name is Ian Flynn. I'm the Head of Creative Solutions here at RocketMill, and today I'm going to talk to you about the modern magic of dynamic creative. It's a magical place where data and creative combine, where feeds and fonts become as one, and spreadsheets and drop shadows work together in harmony. But is it all smoke and mirrors, or is it the real deal? So for people who don't know what dynamic creative is, any creative that changes automatically based on information about the user, whether it's related to their behavior, location, or context. Can that make sense? So basically, it's kind of like an algorithmic way of creating creative for different audiences, locations, contexts, etc. Clever stuff. So I'm going to separate kind of dynamic creative into two sections for the main things that we focus on. Dynamic creative for Facebook and dynamic creative for display, because they do differ quite considerably in their application. So I'll start off with Facebook. So what dynamic creative is for Facebook, ultimately it gives you the ability to have a selection of different images, a selection of different headlines, descriptions, CTAs and so forth, put it up into a little campaign, and then Facebook will automatically, dynamically create this creative on the fly. From that, then you can optimize and see which ones perform best based on the images and description, whatever you use. So that's dynamic creative for Facebook. Dynamic creative for display is slightly different, and I'm actually going to double-click who the creative management system we use to explain it in a little bit more depth.
DoubleClick Rich Media Dynamic Creative lets you set up campaigns with flexible content that you can change anytime without ever having to retraffic creatives. Use Dynamic Creative to optimize your campaign, retarget engaged audiences, and fine-tune messages on the fly. Dynamic Creative makes it easy to target by audience, publishers, time of day, season, location, and more. With Dynamic, you can easily test different creative elements while making sure your best performing creatives automatically get better exposure.
So that's a little flavor of dynamic creative for display. And to kind of put it into summary, the four things, especially that DoubleClick Studio offer within dynamic creative, are kind of using these four variables. So geo-targeting, so that the creative changing based on where you're seeing the ad. The message based on the website the ad appears on, so again, changing the creative based on the contextual whereabouts of where this ad is being seen on what websites and so forth. Audience targeting, so what audiences the ads are going to from DMPs such as Choosers or so forth. And scheduled updates, so you can change the creative based on the time of day. Really, really exciting stuff. So a little bit more depth of how this works. So DoubleClick Studio, this is the feed side of things I mentioned earlier. This is an example feed that they provide for if you wanted to do geo-targeting within creative. So you can see here that you have lots of different columns. The geocode one, for example, shows all the different locations you want your creative to be shown. Within that, you've got headlines and how that differs per geolocation. Then you go into all the different variables, so image URLs, call to action, exit URLs, which you can define yourself and basically show what things you want to change based on the location that you're providing. So really, again, really exciting stuff. And to show how that translates onto the actual creative, you can then, with using HTML5, you can then get parts of your creative and change that based on the feeds that you put in. And you can use things like Google Web Designer. If you're using DoubleClick Studio, tie in really nicely. You don't actually have to do any coding. You basically just say, I want this bit to change based on that column within the spreadsheet. So really simple stuff, really, really exciting. Another thing that I've kind of seen in the ether and I think we'll be hearing a lot more of in the next few months and years is dynamic creative optimization. So it's based on this creative model that we're showing you. And the more creatives you have, the more campaigns you're running, you'll be able to optimize it based on the different things that you're seeing. So it's a bit like CRO, but on a bigger dynamic level for advertising. So it's really exciting stuff. As we can see, this technology is super powerful. So is it all too good to be true, or is there things there we really need to consider? So my learned colleague, Bertram Greenhoof, as I'm sure you're all aware of, he did a video, there's more to CRO than conversion rate optimization. Give it a watch. It's kind of the summary is it's not necessarily just to do with changing the colours of buttons to make landing pages convert better. There's more to it. There's motivational side of things, making sure the messaging's right and so forth. The same applies really to dynamic creative. But I'm going to elaborate a little bit on what Bertie was saying within his video and kind of go into a separate thing. So has anyone heard of gestalt theory? A few of you, good. So something that really resonates with me, it's actually a kind of method of psychology which can be used in multiple different parts of life. Gestalt theory is generated to basically try and distill some of the chaos that's happening on day-to-day life. And what it really means is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, so let me try and give you some examples of this. So if you had spaghetti carbonara, this is the first thing that came to my head when I was thinking about this. You've got, some of the ingredients in there. You've got cheese, eggs, bacon. Anyone else? Pasta, good. So all of those things are obviously individual ingredients. Once they come together, they become a spaghetti carbonara, right? So that's what this means, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Same applies to music compositions. You can go all of the intricate details, all of it individually could be one thing, but once it comes together, it becomes something new. And it's a big thing within design. It's something that really resonated with me from the very beginning. So I'm going to show you what this really means. So this looks like a scribble, a kind of hooky-based thing. The second bit looks a bit like a tooth, but again, it's a kind of scribble, doesn't really mean much. But with those two bits together and a few other bits, it becomes one of the most famous logos in the world. So that's gestalt theory in action, basically. All these little scribbles on their own mean nothing, but as soon as they come together, it becomes something bigger. It applies to layouts as well, not just logos. So again, some of you guys might know roughly where this is going and what brand this is associated with. But looking at this symbol here doesn't really mean much. It's kind of quite abstract. It's got a plant at the top. As soon as we put this on, plants make us happy. Provides us a little bit more context here. So happy meaning maybe the romantic kind of silhouette that you're seeing. Plant being the bit at the top. So it's starting to give me a little bit of commentary of what this is. Then a little bit more context. So they make us want to smooch, neck and kiss. They also make our bottles. And then you've got another little logo at the bottom. So I'm starting to get a little bit more insight into what this is now, I understand. And then CocaCola to finish it off. So all of those things individually wouldn't make much sense on their own, but as soon as you get them together, it becomes its own thing, right? Lastly, just another example. You see that, probably a banana, probably right. Doesn't really mean much on its own. As soon as I put that there, probably the best beer in the world, it becomes It becomes this whole big brand idea. Interestingly, the creative, the design here isn't anything special. It's just a couple of product shots and some unremarkable typography, but together it becomes this whole big brand idea which resonates with with the audience that they're trying to target. It's trying to get that wittiness in, which people who drink beer, drink Carlsberg specifically, have obviously resonated with because they still use it to this day. The thing is that I'm skeptical about, and dynamic creative is still a new thing. I think it's very easy to create the dog's dinner with dynamic creative, because if you're thinking about all these little individual elements that I've shown you that all come together as one, if you're starting to change things on the fly without considering this, you're just going to come up with things that maybe have messaging that doesn't fit with the imagery, it doesn't fit with the descriptions and so forth. So that's the only little bit I'm skeptical of with dynamic creative. However, I think there is a solution, and I'll show you how. How should I use dynamic creative, Ian? Well, I shall tell you. Random presentation. It's all about the brand idea. I think you probably, as marketers, hear this loads, but it is. And to kind of clarify what I mean by this, it's not necessarily the brand, it's the brand idea. So Carlsberg has a brand, right? The brand idea is probably the best lager in the world. It's a different thing. So that's the bit I think you really need to understand. What is the message that we're trying to convey to our target audience that really resonates with people? Get that nailed, and that not necessarily needs dynamic creative. That's just good marketing, and that's not changed since the early ages. It's a complicated subject, establishing your brand idea. A lot of people cite Simon Sinek with this, the Start With Why, which if you haven't read, you do need to read. It's a really insightful book, especially with stuff to do with this. It's not about what you do, it's not about how you do it, it's about why you do it, and that is what the brand idea is. And the way that I start off with trying to establish a brand idea is to bring it back to the basics. What emotion is your brand idea trying to own? So all the best brand ideas that you could think of, things like Cadbury's, which is fun, CocaCola, which you saw earlier, romance, Carlsberg, wittiness. There's always an emotion that's associated with the brand that you're trying to convey, and it's that core primitive emotion that you're trying to tap into with the marketing that we do. So that's a good tester to say, is this a good enough brand idea? If it is, there should be something that sparks within you, or at least for your target audience. Then, and then only then, where you should start to think about dynamic creative. So using dynamic creative to execute and optimize your brand idea, that's what it's for. So I'm going back to Facebook and display here, because again, they're slightly different. On Facebook, for me, if you're trying to convey a brand idea, which is often the most effective way of marketing from a long-term perspective, not necessarily performance, brand ideas are best communicated through video. The reason why this is just because of really the limitations that Facebook have with some of their ads. So you can't, with their image ads specifically, you can only use 20% text within it. So images have to really stay as images. Then you've got the headline and description, which is again very stuck in the way it looks from a template perspective. So there's only really so much you can do. Gestalt doesn't really factor into it. It's good for trying to get someone to an article, for example, but not necessarily to convey an emotion because it's quite restrictive. However, video is better because you can actually start to convey emotion within that. And you can do it, the standard formats within video that we use are 6 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. 6 seconds should be enough to get that across if you're doing it right. On display, which elaborates on the Gestalt theory a little bit more because you can actually do it as its own design as opposed to a templated thing that Facebook offer. It's about using dynamic creative to show nuances of your brand idea. So it is considering how does your brand idea differ between location, between audience, all the things like that. So let me give you an example. Depend is a client we work on. Their brand ideal, their brand promise is dignity restored. So for people who don't know what Depend is, it's an incontinence product. So it deals with the product which has a lot of stigma associated with it. And what they're trying to do and the kind of why they do it, if going back to what I was saying earlier, it is about trying to restore dignity for their users. It's not necessarily saying we are an incontinence product and we stop leakage. It's about trying to restore dignity. And that is the emotional hook that they're trying to get. So brand idea is there and it exists. Dynamic creative now comes in. So their target audience differs. It's not just one format of target audience. There's new mums that suffer with it. There's elderly men and women. There's people that are more active than others and not so active. There's lots of different personas that they've done the research on and tried to associate who use Depend's products. So here you can see you've got one example of new mums, one example of an active user. So one of their products is an active fit range. And an over 60s male as well. So same product, same brand idea, different applications. And that's where dynamic creative becomes really interesting. So in conclusion, for me, dynamic creative isn't about smoke and mirrors, it is the real deal, but it's just a magical process for leveraging your brand in an efficient, personalised way. Thank you very much.